This exhibition is all Exaltations, Meditations and Sculpture. Is a collaborative work that I did with Diana Daniels, curator of the Crocker Art Museum, for the last 15 years or so. I invited her to work with me, someone who can come in and be that person who sort of looks at it from a different perspective.
As a curator, I have been humbled by, whenever I have had the honor of visiting someone at their studio, is knowing that you just don't pop in and say hi. It is a concentrated effort on the person to be prepared for you when you arrive. I'm always tremendously respectful about the insight that you get behind the scenes.
It's the show before the show.
It's the show before the show. And that somebody, cares enough to have you be the person that comes in and takes that look. I just kept coming back to this one thing. And there was other works that were really good. We had an extensive conversation about an earlier work that was influential in the final presentation here, but I just kept coming back to this one concept. I think it's time to transition to how we ended up here.
This exhibition came about through working with these propane tanks that I came upon.
On the way home, there was this one particular house that has really nice amount of junk and like good stuff. And I was like, I'd look at it every day, and I saw in a rack these abandoned tanks. I actually knew the guy, and I'd asked him earlier, it's like, what are you doing with those? Well, I don't know, I got to recycle them, I let my brothers, and so turns out a good friend of mine was the person who went in and did a lot of the remodeling to flip the house again. I come over there one day, and he's actually, you see some of the holes in the tanks? He's got like this big drill out, and he's got this other thing, and he's actually trying to cut these. Like, I don't know what these things are. I think they're stainless steel. I can't cut them. And I'm like, do you want me to take them off your hands?
They sat in my studio, and I've been playing around with them with different configurations, different arrangements. They took on different identities throughout the process. When I discovered their ringing quality, I was really enthralled with the idea that they could be bells, and bells in a way that an audience could interact with.
When you were drafting these together, is this just something that comes to you naturally? Is it something, you said you liked minimal graphic line? Explain more about how how it is that your brain is wired, that you come up with these great reductions that are still, they communicate so clearly.
Well, one of the things that was exciting about so much of this project. With each phase of it, I was doing levels of investigation and research that, until I felt satisfied that I was like, okay, I think I have enough information here. I realized that, right off the bat, it's like, okay, well, I could render these things and just sort of, throw them together. I don't like to admit this, but I do like math. There's parts of me that really enjoys doing calculations.
We were actually very rigorous about the measurements and placement. The math seemed to matter.
I had to, for each building, find essentially sources. A couple of them had to go to my local library actually to get accurate dimensions, so I could actually then calculate them and reduce them down so that they would be proportionately correct. So these are to scale. They vary from anywhere from 0.03 to 0.05, I believe, in terms of their scale.
When Diana came to my studio, she and I had extensive discussions about lots of different work that I had in my studio and which would be the most appropriate for this exhibition. We kept on coming back to these bells, and I had already put together all of the religious symbols, the iconography, and I'd already had been working on these different juxtapositions of these different symbols. And with that, in combination with the sound of the bells, that really made for a powerful statement to move forward with. Then I started to then look at these bases as being buildings, and not only just buildings, but skyscrapers. And skyscrapers that were particularly built in the 1960s and 70s, that were these icons of the American landscape, and how these buildings really became the cathedrals of the 20th century. And in that definition, the images of capitalism and how these daunting spires, in the landscape become the dominance of a time period, of a culture, and typify the most exact kind of representations of modernist photographer and videographer, a good friend of mine, came to the studio to do a photo shoot for the exhibition card. And during that session, Matt DeMarcos brought out these LED lights that actually started to project light through the symbols on the tops of these bells. It was at that moment, it's like, yeah, this is the exhibition right here. I'm going to be creating a theater for these projections to exist within, a theater where all of these buildings and the sound and interactivity with viewers can exist, where viewers will feel this sense of being surrounded by the physicality of the sculptures and the bells and the images, and also by the abstract images and projections that cover the walls of the gallery. So it's been really exciting to watch people and watch the audience of the campus of community in Sacramento State to come into this space and have these personal experiences as well as universal experiences and start to actually engage in a dialogue. Really goes way beyond themselves and really starts to embrace this whole, the idea of this world culture.
Coming from a video background, I'm used to the images being projections. They're really almost shadows, they just happen to be translucent with different colors.
When people come in, they tend to walk around a bit and they do not touch anything. You know, there's this tendency that you should not touch the artwork.
I mean, anytime when somebody says, here, art, go touch it, well, who doesn't? You know, I love that.
The interaction between the people and the bells and the pieces themselves changed from person to person, but there was something that was a little bit childlike in their interactions with them at times that was really interesting to watch.
When I hit the gongs, it draws my attention towards it temporarily, and then it just kind of dissolves, and then it becomes still.
For me, when you take that hammer and you hit the thing, you're now part of making that vibration, and then that sound and that vibration resonates through you.
And then you get the bells going, and that is evocative of particular religions and tradition.
The banging on the gong and the resonance that they take, turning them into an instrument, kind of like a lighthouse for sound.
After spending enough time in here, you start to struggle to see the differences between them, which is maybe the point.
Each of these pillars are trying to assert their presence and stand out.
Especially given that they're not all religious symbols. I think he mentions in the little breakdown that it's more about identity than it is about religion, and so you have the little marijuana leaf over there.
The first time I came in here, there's this big old weed leaf, right? And it's like, it just caught my eye immediately.
To have them all represented in a room, that unto itself is, it almost makes a statement.
These are one of the shows and pieces where you come back and see different things, see a different angle, take a little bit a different view of the pieces each time.
My first impression of this show is I had felt that Professor Connelly had appropriated missiles.
So after work, Andrew asked me if I could help put together the mallets for the bell sculptures.
I've associated the bells with warheads that were now mounted with symbols of positivity as opposed to symbols of destruction or war. And it took me a while for me to see that they were skyscrapers. It was a cityscape. And the fact that now that we were able to also strike these warheads or these soldier helmets, spreading peaceful movement, peaceful sound and movement.
Looking back at the symbols are probably the biggest part of it. That I look back and you look back in when I was younger and what those symbols mean to me, particularly the cross, the crucifix, being Catholic and so forth. And then seeing the other symbols and realizing, you know, we're all this one world and there's so many different things going on and currently right now in our world. So those are powerful symbols and you start from there because you walk in, you see them. And then you kind of work down, you see the bow, the sound, the noise, which is part of all of our lives, right? We always hear bells, like Andrew's mentioned in church, meditation, whatever you do, it's a symbol of that. So, and they're all tied in together.